Just hours before November 2nd, something is deeply troubling the most advanced observatories on the planet. The latest satellite data shows that 3I, Atlas, that interstellar object that appeared out of nowhere just weeks ago, is emitting a coded sequence of light and radiation. But it's not just any type of signal. The pattern changes every 12 hours exactly, with mathematical precision impossible to attribute to chance, as if counting down to a specific point in time. Astronomers around the world call it the invisible countdown, and meanwhile, NASA maintains an absolute silence that unsettles even the most skeptical experts. Are we facing a simple astronomical event of natural origin, or have we just intercepted the most important message in all of modern human history? Before continuing, leave me in the comments what you think of this discovery. Do you believe we're facing something completely new, or just a misinterpreted cosmic phenomenon? Your first reaction says a lot. It all began with the discovery of synchronized pulses on November 1st. Until that moment, 3I, Atlas, had been cataloged as just another interstellar comet, one of those cosmic travelers that cross our solar system once every several years. But since that day, the object's behavior became completely unpredictable. The infrared sensors of the James Webb Space Telescope, that technological marvel that has shown us galaxies being born 13 billion light-years away, detected a series of light flashes coming directly from 3I, Atlas. At first, technicians thought it was a calibration error. However, when the data was converted into spectrograms, something extraordinary appeared on the screens, an almost perfect binary pattern. Experts have been trying to decipher it ever since, working in 24-hour shifts without interruption. Physicists, mathematicians, computational linguists, even retired military cryptographers have been unofficially summoned. But the strangest thing, what really sets off all the alarms, is that the code seems to have a beginning, development, and end. It's not background noise. It's not scattered radiation. It's a structure with syntax, and everything points to that ending, that sequence closure, occurring exactly on November 2nd. Today, the Arecibo Observatory, that metal giant that listened to the cosmos for decades before its partial collapse, had backups, secondary equipment, satellite databases, international collaboration networks. Using those reconstructed systems, a Puerto Rican team partially managed to map the signal from 3I divided by Atlas. And what they found is unprecedented. Each flash equals a symbol. The repetition of certain blocks disturbingly resembles the basic structures of human language: subject, predicate, object. There are hierarchies. There are intentional pauses. There is emphasis. It's not cosmic noise produced by stellar magnetic fields. It's not solar interference caused by plasma storms. This is different. NASA's most advanced decryption algorithms, the same ones that analyze encrypted communications from space probes trillions of kilometers away, were applied to the raw data from 3I, ATLS. And in the middle of automated processing, one word repeated 47 times in different segments of the code. A word in English, clear as crystal: origin. From that moment on, there were no more official communications from the American Space Agency. Scheduled press conferences were canceled. Technical reports that were supposed to be published every 72 hours simply stopped appearing. NASA's last official tweet about interstellar objects is dated October 30th. After that, total silence. What if we're not simply observing a natural transmission from the cosmos, but actively receiving a message designed to be understood? Write Atlas in the comments if you want me to keep investigating every detail of this case. I need to know how many really want to get to the bottom of this. Anonymous sources from NASA's Ames Research Center, located in Silicon Valley, assure under condition of absolute anonymity that all public reports related to 3I, Atlas, have been suspended until further indefinite notice. Even more disturbing, access to the centralized server where observation data was stored was restricted. Technicians with more than 15 years of experience at the agency reported that their credentials stopped working from one day to the next. Several accounts of associated researchers were deactivated without formal explanation. Emails sent from institutional addresses simply bounced back with generic error messages. Within the organization, between hallways and cafeterias, people speak in low voices about a very clear internal directive: filter information only when there's a completely validated official explanation. The problem is that explanation doesn't arrive. There are no drafts. There are no coordination meetings with the press. There's nothing. It's as if NASA had decided, for the first time in decades of relative scientific transparency, to simply look the other way and wait for the issue to fade away on its own. But the issue doesn't fade. On the contrary, it grows. Amateur astronomers with telescopes of barely 8 inches are capturing the same flashes from their backyards. YouTube channels specializing in amateur astronomy upload videos every 6 hours showing the light anomalies. Scientific forums on Reddit explode with theories, handmade orbital calculations, simulations in free software. The global community is seeing the same thing NASA sees. The difference is they have nothing to hide or nothing to lose. What kind of message could justify the coordinated silence of an entire space agency, its private contractors, and its international allies? What type of information requires this level of containment? According to the most recent predictive models, built by independent astrophysicists using publicly accessible data from the European Southern Observatory, the last pulse of the sequence will occur exactly at 22:40 UTC on November 2nd. That means that, depending on where you're reading this, it could be in a matter of hours or even minutes. After that critical moment, 3I Atlas will be completely out of direct observation range for almost 48 hours. Its trajectory will take it behind the sun from our terrestrial perspective, blocking any type of optical or radiometric monitoring. Will be blind. And when it reappears on the other side, nobody knows with certainty what we'll find. The most cautious scientists fear that this pulse cycle is the last before a total alteration in its orbital trajectory. Something that, according to all known laws of celestial mechanics, shouldn't be possible without an active propulsion source. And here's where things get truly disturbing. A comet, even an interstellar one traveling at tremendous speeds, cannot change its course without an evident physical reason. It can fragment from thermal stress. It can release volatile gases that act as small natural propellants. It can be diverted by the gravity of a massive planet. But 3I Atlas shows no signs of fragmentation. It's not releasing detectable gaseous coma, and it didn't get close enough to Jupiter or any other gas giant to justify a significant trajectory change. So, what's really happening? The most advanced computer simulations, those that require supercomputers the size of entire buildings to run, suggest that if 3I Atlas really alters its course after the final pulse, we would be facing something unprecedented in the history of observational astronomy. We would be confirming, beyond reasonable doubt, that this object possesses some type of directional control system. And directional control systems don't evolve naturally in space rocks. They're designed. Tell me in the comments which theory convinces you most up to this point. Extremely rare natural phenomenon? Extraterrestrial technology? Classified military experiment? I want to know what people who made it this far really think. Let's explore the possibilities with brutal scientific honesty. Hypothesis 1. Massive and coordinated human error. Perhaps all the observatories, all the satellites, all the analysis algorithms are experiencing the same technical failure simultaneously. Perhaps there's electromagnetic interference of terrestrial origin that nobody has identified yet. Perhaps we're seeing patterns where there's only noise, because our brains are evolutionarily programmed to find order in chaos. This is the most comforting explanation. It's also the least likely, considering the number of independent systems that are reporting exactly the same data. Hypothesis 2. Unknown astrophysical phenomenon. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. We've been seriously observing it for barely 4 centuries. It's completely possible, even probable, that natural processes exist that we don't yet understand. Pulsars that emit at specific frequencies, space crystals that reflect light in structured ways, exotic chemical reactions in the core of interstellar comets. This hypothesis is scientifically valid and keeps the door open to discovery without falling into extreme speculation. Hypothesis 3. Object of artificial origin. Not necessarily extraterrestrial. It could be an automatic probe launched by some terrestrial power decades ago, now returning in a calculated orbit. It could be classified military technology that not even current governments remember having authorized. It could be an abandoned scientific project from the Cold War, lost in space for generations. This option would explain the institutional silence. Nobody wants to admit we lost control of something dangerous. Hypothesis 4. Deliberate interstellar message. The one everyone's thinking about but few dare to say out loud. If a technological civilization really exists somewhere in the galaxy, and if they really wanted to communicate with other forms of emerging intelligence, how would they do it? They can't send crewed ships. The distances are absurd. They can't send traditional radio waves. They degrade and disperse after a few light years. But they could send physical objects, autonomous probes programmed to activate upon detecting star systems with potentially habitable planets. They could design those objects to emit signals that are impossible to ignore once detected. And they could program those signals to contain basic information, a cosmic hello encoded in universal mathematics. What if what we're seeing isn't a comet at all, but a machine designed specifically to be found and studied by civilizations like ours? It's not the first time we've faced this kind of mystery. In 2017, the interstellar object Oumuamua passed through our solar system at incredible speed. Orbital calculations showed it didn't come from any known nearby star. Its shape was strange, elongated, like a cigar or perhaps like a sail. And most importantly, it accelerated as it moved away from the sun without any clear explanation. Scientists proposed the solar sail effect hypothesis, where light pressure pushes extremely flat objects, but the numbers didn't quite add up. Astronomer Avi Loeb, chairman of Harvard's astronomy department, publicly suggested that Oumuamua could be extraterrestrial technology. He was ridiculed by many colleagues, accused of sensationalism. But nobody could ever fully explain all the object's anomalies. And now, 8 years later, we have 3I, Atlas, behaving even more strangely. The crucial difference is that Oumuamua is already gone. It's outside the solar system, inaccessible, impossible to study beyond the data we captured during its brief visit. But 3I, Atlas, is still here. We can still observe it. We can still try to communicate with it. If there's really something there listening, some groups of radio amateurs are already trying. They transmit simple mathematical sequences toward the object's exact coordinates, prime numbers, the Fibonacci sequence, universal constants like pi. Nobody really expects a response, but everyone understands the importance of trying, because if there's even an infinitesimal possibility that this is the moment, the turning point in human history where we confirm we're not alone, then every second of silence is a wasted second. The clock advances inexorably toward 2240 UTC. In laboratories around the world, scientists review the data over and over, looking for errors they don't find. In observatory control rooms, telescopes the size of buildings all point toward the same spot in the sky. On internet forums, millions of people speculate, debate, share increasingly elaborate theories. And in NASA's central offices, in the silence of meetings that nobody admits are happening, decisions are being made that will affect the future of our species. Because if this signal is real, if the message is authentic, then everything changes. Our position in the universe, our understanding of life, our religions, our philosophies, our insignificant wars over pieces of land on a planet that suddenly feels infinitely small. Everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos would be rewritten in an instant. And perhaps that's why the silence exists. Not from malicious conspiracy, but from genuine fear of the consequences. How do you tell 7 billion people that they just received a call from outer space? How do you handle the panic, the religious ecstasy, the collapse of millennia-old belief systems? How do you prevent the news from unleashing social, economic, political chaos? The answer is simple: you can't. There's no protocol for this. There's no instruction manual. There's no contingency plan that really works when reality surpasses any fiction we've imagined. So you keep silent. You gather the experts. You try to understand first, before communicating. You buy time while the entire world, unknowingly, is minutes away from changing forever. The mathematical models are clear. After the final pulse, 3I, Atlas, will enter the solar shadow zone for 48 critical hours. 2 days without direct observation. 2 days where absolutely anything could happen without us having any way to detect it. It could completely change course. It could accelerate toward deep interstellar space. It could, in theory, head toward Earth. That last possibility, though remote, is what generates the most anxiety among experts. Not because they believe it will necessarily impact us, but because we can't rule it out with absolute certainty. The orbits of interstellar objects are notoriously difficult to predict with extreme precision. A minuscule change in trajectory, just a few degrees, could mean the difference between passing millions of kilometers away or entering our atmosphere. And if the object really possesses its own propulsion, then all traditional calculations become useless. Some scientists propose attempting a rapid interception mission. Launch a small probe, something the size of a refrigerator, equipped with cameras and basic sensors, on a controlled collision trajectory with 3I, Atlas. not to destroy it, but to study it up close, to obtain data that no terrestrial telescope can provide, to see, once and for all, what it's really made of. The problem is time. Designing, building, and launching even the simplest probe requires months, if not years, and 3I, Atlas, will be out of reach in a matter of days. The window of opportunity is closing before our eyes, and there's absolutely nothing we can do to stop it, unless someone has already launched something. Unless there's a classified space program that has rapid response capabilities the public doesn't know about. Unless the military, governments, intelligence agencies have been preparing for this moment for decades. Is it possible? Historically, every time humanity has faced a potential existential threat, we've developed technologies in absolute secrecy until the moment of using them. The atomic bomb, spy satellites, stratospheric reconnaissance aircraft. Why would space be different? Not everyone is convinced of the mystery. There's a considerable group of skeptical scientists who argue, with methodological reason, that we're seeing patterns where there are none. That the human mind is evolutionarily programmed to detect intelligence and purpose even in completely random phenomena. That the history of astronomy is full of alien signals that ended up being pulsars, quasars, or simple instrumental calibration errors. They cite the case of pulsars when they were discovered in 1967. The signals were so regular, so perfectly synchronized, that astronomers initially called them LGM-1, Little Green Men number 1. They genuinely thought they'd found extraterrestrial transmissions, until they understood they were neutron stars rotating at incredible speeds, emitting radiation in beams like cosmic lighthouses. The same thing could be happening now. We could be facing an extraordinary natural phenomenon, something that will expand our understanding of physics, but that's definitely not a message from another civilization. This skeptical stance is healthy. It's necessary. Science works precisely because we demand extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. We can't simply assume something is alien technology just because we don't immediately understand it. History has taught us that lesson again and again. But it's also true that excessive skepticism can blind us to genuine discoveries. That sometimes, very rarely, the extraordinary explanation turns out to be correct. And that if we prematurely dismiss the possibility, we could lose the most important opportunity in all of science history. The balance is delicate. Keep an open mind without letting your brain fall out, as they say. Behind all this data, all these spectroscopies and computer simulations, there are real people making decisions under unimaginable pressure. Scientists who dedicated their entire lives to studying the cosmos, suddenly facing the possibility that their work has implications beyond the academic. Government officials without training in astrophysics, having to decide what information to release to the public and what to withhold. Journalists trying to report a story that could be the most important ever told, or the biggest fiasco of their career. Imagine being NASA's director at this moment. You have incomplete data, political pressure from all angles, scientists within your own agency who don't agree on what the observations mean. You have to consider national security, international relations, the impact on financial markets if there's panic. You have to think about the consequences of every word you say publicly. What would you do? Would you be completely transparent, releasing all data in real time and letting the entire world speculate along with you? Or would you apply the precautionary principle, waiting until you have absolute certainty before making any statement? There's no correct answer. Any decision has potentially catastrophic costs, and meanwhile the clock keeps advancing. Minutes become seconds. The invisible countdown of 3I, Atlas, approaches zero. Indifferent to our doubts, our fears, our bureaucratic deliberations. It's worth remembering that this wouldn't be the first message we've sent or received from space. In 1974, from the same Arecibo observatory that now helps decode the pulses from 3I, Atlas, we sent a radio transmission toward the globular cluster M13. The Arecibo message contained basic information about humanity, numbers in binary, atoms of the chemical elements that compose us, DNA structure, the human figure, Earth's population, our solar system, a diagram of the telescope sending the message. It was simple, elegant, designed to be understood by any civilization with basic knowledge of mathematics and chemistry. It will take 25,000 years to reach its destination. And if someone responds, it will take us another 25,000 years to receive the response. 50,000 years in total. Entire civilizations could rise and fall in that time, but we tried anyway, because the hope of contact surpasses the hopelessness of distance. And now perhaps, someone tried the same thing in the opposite direction. Perhaps millennia ago, a civilization somewhere in the Milky Way launched probes toward promising star systems. Small time capsules designed to activate upon detecting signs of technological life. Radio transmissions, industrial atmospheric pollution, spectral signatures of illuminated cities, and perhaps one of those probes just detected us. Perhaps the message isn't directed at us specifically, but at whoever is here when it arrives. A hello sent through time and space, waiting patiently for eons until finding someone capable of hearing it. It's a romantic idea, almost poetic, and completely possible within the known laws of physics. Let's look at this from perspective. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, contains between 100,000 and 400 billion stars, depending on which estimate you use. Each of those stars has, on average, at least one planet. That means hundreds of billions of worlds just in our galaxy. And there are approximately 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. The numbers are so absurd that the human brain simply cannot process them intuitively. But let's try anyway. If only 1% of planets have suitable conditions for life, and only 1% of those develop complex life, and only 1% of those develop intelligent life, and only 1% of those develop technology capable of interstellar communication, we would still have millions of civilizations just in the Milky Way. So, where are they? That's the Fermi paradox, posed by physicist Enrico Fermi in 1950. If statistical probabilities so favor the existence of intelligent extraterrestrial life, why haven't we found clear evidence of it? The proposed answers are numerous and concerning. Perhaps technological civilizations self-destruct before being able to expand through the cosmos. Perhaps space is so vast that contact is statistically improbable, even with millions of active civilizations. Perhaps there's something inherent to technological development that creates a great filter, an evolutionary obstacle that most species don't overcome. Or perhaps, simply, we hadn't been searching with the right technology at the right time, until now. Regardless of what happens in the next few hours, this event already changed something fundamental in modern astronomy. It demonstrated that we need better early detection systems for interstellar objects. It demonstrated that international cooperation in space science is absolutely critical. It demonstrated that the general public is genuinely interested in these topics when presented with honesty and appropriate context. Several observatories already announced plans for continuous sky surveillance networks using artificial intelligence to automatically detect anomalies that might go unnoticed in manual analysis. Space agencies are discussing standardized protocols for sharing data about unusual objects in real time, without bureaucratic delays that could cost observation opportunities. Even if 3I ATLS turns out to be a completely natural phenomenon, it will have been worth it. It will have forced us to improve our capabilities. It will have made us ask questions we needed to ask. And if it's not natural, well, then everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe has just been fundamentally rewritten. NASA remains silent while the world watches, holding its breath. Data disappears from public servers while thousands of independent astronomers capture every photon that 3I ATLS emits. And time, that impartial tyrant, continues its inexorable march toward 2240 UTC. November 2nd could end up being just another date on the astronomical calendar. A historical curiosity we'll study for years, trying to understand what caused those strange signals from that particular comet. Or it could be the exact moment when humanity discovered it was never alone in the immensity of the cosmos. Perhaps tomorrow we'll have the definitive answers that silence all speculation. Or perhaps 3I Atlas only came to remind us of something we forgot in our daily arrogance, that we're a young species in an ancient universe, barely beginning to understand the rules of the cosmic game in which we're all participating. And perhaps, just perhaps, someone somewhere in space has been watching us since long before we even knew to look up. The telescopes are aligned, scientists wait at their stations, analysis software processes data in real time, and somewhere in NASA's central offices, people with information we don't have are making decisions that will affect the future of our species. All that's left for us is to wait and watch and be ready for whatever comes next. If you want to stay up to date with every new update about 3I Atlas, with every piece of data that leaks, with every theory that emerges, subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell. This is just beginning, and I need you here when the answers arrive. Comment right now what you think NASA is really hiding. Are they protecting the truth to avoid mass panic, or does the truth protect us from something we don't yet understand? Your theory matters. Your voice matters. Because if this really is the most important moment in human history, then we all deserve to be part of the conversation. See you in the next video. If by that time the world hasn't completely changed, on the 4th of November 2025, somewhere between Earth and the boundaries of the inner solar system, something extraordinary is about to occur. A massive solar eruption, cataloged as a Class X event by NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory, will travel through interplanetary space at more than 1,500 kilometers per second. Its trajectory, calculated weeks in advance, will take it directly toward the orbital position where the interstellar object known as 3I ATLASS was last detected. But there's something the computational models cannot explain, something that has kept dozens of astrophysicists awake for the past 72 hours. 3I ATLAS seems to know that the impact is coming. And not only that, it seems to be preparing to respond to it. The data is clear. Measurements from the James Webb Space Telescope recorded in the early morning of November 2 a series of electromagnetic micropulses emanating from the exact location of the object. Rhythmic, constant pulses, separated by intervals of 33 seconds. Nothing unusual in the cosmos, some will say. After all, pulsars, magnetars, and other celestial bodies emit radiation periodically. But there's a detail that makes these pulses completely different. Their frequency exactly matches the projections of the solar storm model developed by the Hawaii Solar Laboratory. In other words, 3I Atlas is emitting energy at the same rate that the sun will emit its next flare before it has even been released, as if it were synchronized with an event that hasn't yet occurred, as if it could see the future. Before continuing, leave me in the comments what's the first thing you think when you hear this. Scientific coincidence or something deeper? Write your first reaction, because what comes next is going to completely change the way we understand this object. Let's return to the facts. On October 28, the Minor Planet Center of the International Astronomical Union issued a discreet, almost routine communiqué announcing the detection of a new interstellar object. They assigned it the provisional designation 3I Atlas, following the standard protocol for bodies that come from beyond our solar system. According to initial orbital calculations, it was an extrasolar comet, similar in composition to 2I Borisov, the second confirmed interstellar object in history. Its hyperbolic trajectory indicated it came from the depths of space, crossing the plane of the ecliptic at a steep angle, moving at a speed of approximately 42 kilometers per second. Everything seemed normal. Everything fit within the known parameters of interstellar visitors. Until the spectroscopic measurements began, the James Webb team, led by astrophysicist Elena Vargas from the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore, directed the observatory's instruments toward 3I Atlas during a 6-hour observation window on October 30. What they expected to find was a typical chemical signature: water, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, perhaps some simple organic compounds. What they found was an anomalous absorption spectrum with lines that didn't correspond to any known molecule in astronomical databases. Even more disturbing, the object showed periodic luminous variations that couldn't be attributed to the natural rotation of a cometary nucleus. The fluctuations were too regular, too precise, and they occurred in short, high-energy bursts, concentrated in the mid-infrared band. For 48 hours, the international scientific community privately debated the nature of these emissions. Some proposed it was asymmetric degassing processes, where solar heat causes ejections of volatile material from specific points on the comet's surface, thus creating apparently regular brightness patterns. Others suggested it could be the result of interaction between the object's magnetic field and the solar wind, generating small, localized electromagnetic storms. But none of these explanations could account for the most disturbing characteristic of the data: temporal synchronization with future solar events. This is where the story takes a turn toward the truly inexplicable. Dr. Nathan Lyle, senior researcher at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, was the first to notice the correlation. While analyzing the light curves of 3I Atlas, he decided to superimpose the data with predictions from the Enlil model, the space weather forecasting system that NASA uses to anticipate solar storms. What he discovered left him paralyzed in front of his screen for several minutes. The object's electromagnetic pulses were not only periodic, but their frequency progressively increased in perfect consonance with the predicted intensification of solar activity. It was as if 3I Atlas were responding to a script written days in advance, adjusting its behavior based on something that hadn't yet happened. Lyle shared his findings with a small group of trusted colleagues. The reaction was immediate skepticism. Spurious correlations are common in astronomy, especially when working with limited data sets and short observation windows. It could be a statistical coincidence, some argued. It could be a calibration error in Webb's instruments, others suggested. But Lyle insisted on conducting cross-checks with data from the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, the stereo satellite, and ground-based geomagnetic monitoring stations. All sources confirmed the same thing. There existed an impossible temporal correspondence between 3I, Atlas's emissions, and solar activity projections. The object was anticipating the sun's behavior with minute precision. Tell me in the comments, do you think this can be explained with known physics? Or are we facing something that challenges our current understanding of the universe? I need to know what you think before revealing what happened next. On November 1, at 1437 UTC, the sun released a coronal mass ejection of moderate magnitude, classified as M84 on the solar flare scale. It wasn't a particularly extraordinary event. These types of eruptions occur with some frequency during periods of high activity in the 11-year solar cycle. What made this ejection special was what happened exactly 11 minutes before the solar plasma left the corona. 3I, Atlas experienced an abrupt increase in its infrared radiation emissions, reaching intensity levels 3 times higher than its baseline. Then, at the precise moment the ejection was detected by the SOHO satellite's coronagraphs, the object's emissions ceased completely for 47 seconds. And then, they resumed their rhythmic pattern of 33 seconds, as if nothing had happened. The information first reached the Webb operations teams, then the program directors of the major space agencies, and finally, in a fragmented and controlled manner, to a limited circle of scientists with special access authorizations. There were no press releases, no public conferences, only encrypted messages, emergency virtual meetings, and classified documents with temporary confidentiality seals. The question that no one dared to formulate openly, but that everyone privately shared, was as simple as it was terrifying. How can a physical object, apparently inert, react to a stellar event before it manifests? Theories began to proliferate in private academic channels. Some researchers proposed that 3I ATLAS could be equipped with some type of extremely sensitive passive sensor, capable of detecting precursor magnetic fluctuations that occur in the sun's inner layers hours before an eruption. These fluctuations are practically invisible to our current instruments, but theoretically could be captured by sufficiently advanced technology. Others suggested the object could be responding not to the sun itself, but to the shock waves of the solar wind that constantly travel through interplanetary space, using them as a means of communication or navigation. There were even those who speculated about the possibility that 3I, Atlas, was in some kind of quantum resonance with the solar electromagnetic field, a phenomenon not described by current physics but mathematically plausible in certain exotic theoretical frameworks. But the most disturbing hypothesis, the one Lyle developed in a 47-page working document that circulated among fewer than 20 people worldwide, was different. According to his calculations, if we assume that 3I, Atlas, possesses some type of information processing system, and if that system operates under principles we don't yet understand, then the electromagnetic pulses we're observing might not be simple passive emissions. They could be signals, messages encoded in radiation patterns, transmitted through the plasma medium of the solar wind, amplified by solar eruptions as if using the sun itself as a cosmic signal repeater. In other words, 3I, Atlas wouldn't be reacting to the Sunday, it would be using it. Imagine for a moment this possibility. An object that travels alone through interstellar vacuum for thousands, perhaps millions of years, crossing the absolute darkness between the stars. And when it finally enters a stellar system, when it detects the presence of an active star, it doesn't just pass by, it positions itself strategically in relation to it, studies its patterns of electromagnetic activity, learns its behavior, and then begins to transmit. Using solar eruptions as carriers of its signals, sending information through the heliosphere, perhaps toward other similar objects in other systems, perhaps towards some specific point in interstellar space that we still cannot identify. It's an idea that sounds like science fiction, I know. But the data is there, and the data doesn't lie. What if I told you that 3I, Atlas's behavior isn't random, but part of a protocol? Write in the comments the word Atlas if you want me to investigate this theory more deeply in the next video. The Hawaii Solar Laboratory, operated by the University of Hawaii at Manoa, is one of the world's most advanced facilities for studying solar dynamics. Its predictive space weather models have an accuracy rate exceeding 85% in 72-hour time windows. On November 2, its systems indicated that a new Class X solar eruption was forming in active region AR 13497, a group of sunspots located near the solar equator. Initial projections placed the event between November 4 and 5, with a peak maximum probability on the 4th between 10 and 12 UTC. The resulting ejection, according to calculations, would travel directly toward the area of space where the latest measurements had placed 3I Atlas. This information was immediately shared with the Webb teams, the Chandra X-ray Observatory, the Fermi Gamma Ray Space Telescope, and major terrestrial radio telescope networks. A multiple observation campaign was coordinated, designed to capture every photon, every particle, every electromagnetic fluctuation emanating from the object during the event. If 3I Atlas was going to respond again, this time humanity would be watching with all its technological eyes open. It was the perfect opportunity to definitively confirm or rule out Lyell's hypothesis, and everyone knew it. But something occurred that no one anticipated. In the hours following the internal publication of the solar forecast, 3I Atlas changed its behavior. The intervals between pulses, which had been constant at 33 seconds for days, began to gradually shorten. 32 seconds, 31, 30. As if the object were accelerating its activity in preparation for something. Energy flux measurements also increased, not abruptly, but in a smooth and continuous progression that astrophysicists described as disturbingly organic. It wasn't the type of curve produced by a geological or chemical phenomenon. It was the type of curve produced by a system that is activating. At 3:22 UTC on November 3, the Webb detected something completely new. A brief but intense emission in the far ultraviolet band, a region of the spectrum where 3I Atlas had been practically silent until that moment. The signal lasted barely 8 seconds, but its intensity was sufficient to temporarily saturate the detectors. When the analysis team processed the data, they discovered the emission wasn't continuous, but consisted of a series of extremely rapid pulses, each approximately 0.3 seconds in duration, separated by intervals of 0.7 seconds. A clear binary pattern. On, off, on, off. 8 pulses in total. The mathematicians on Vargas's team immediately set to work analyzing the sequence. Was it random? Was it an instrumental artifact? Or did it contain coded information? They applied Fourier analysis, searched for hidden periodicities, compared the pattern with known sequences of natural phenomena. And although the results weren't conclusive, there was something that caught several researchers' attention. If you interpret the 8 pulses as binary digits, with each pulse representing a 1 and each pause representing a 0, you get the number 10,101,010 inches, binary, which in decimal is 170, a number that by itself means nothing in particular. But several scientists noted it's exactly 5 times 34, and 34 seconds is the projected duration it will take for the peak of the November 4 solar ejection to cross the estimated location of 3I Atlas. Coincidence? Possibly. Pareidolia, that psychological phenomenon that makes us see patterns where there's only noise? Maybe. But when numbers begin to align this way, when correlations accumulate one after another, even the most skeptical scientists start to feel that uncomfortable sensation that something bigger is occurring, something our current theories cannot encompass. Comment what interpretation you give to this number. Is it a countdown, a mathematical message, or simply our mind seeking order in chaos? There's a concept in the philosophy of science called paradigm shift. It was popularized by Thomas Kuhn in his work on scientific revolutions. The idea is simple. Most of the time, science advances gradually, accumulating data that fits within existing models. But occasionally, so many anomalies accumulate, so much data that cannot be explained by prevailing theories, that the complete model must be replaced by a new one. The transition from Newtonian physics to Einsteinian relativity was one of those moments. The discovery of quantum mechanics was another. And some researchers are beginning to wonder if 3I Atlas could be the catalyst for the next great change. Because if this object is really anticipating solar events with temporal precision, if it's really using electromagnetic radiation intentionally, If it really contains some type of system that processes information and executes protocols, then we face one of two possibilities. Either there exists a completely new physical phenomenon we've never observed before, something that allows precognition of astrophysical events through mechanisms we don't yet understand, or, and this is the option that no one in the official scientific community dares to pronounce aloud, but everyone considers privately, 3I, Atlas is not a natural object. It's a machine, a probe, an artifact constructed by a non-human intelligence, sent across the abyss between stars with a purpose we're only beginning to glimpse. The simple possibility that this is true changes everything. It would change our understanding of our place in the cosmos. It would change the fundamental questions we ask about the origin of life, the prevalence of intelligence in the universe, the nature of advanced technology, and it would change, above all, the way we see ourselves. Because if there are others out there, if they've been sending these silent messengers through the galaxy for eons, moving between stars like ships on a dark ocean, then we are not special. We are simply another species, slowly awakening to the realization that the universe is full of voices, and we've been deaf to them throughout our entire history. The problem is that science cannot operate based on dramatic possibilities. It requires evidence. It requires reproducibility. It requires that extraordinary hypotheses be supported by extraordinary data. And although the data from 3I Atlas is certainly anomalous, it still doesn't cross the threshold of the extraordinary in an indisputable way. There are still plausible alternative explanations. There are still margins of error in the measurements. There is still, in short, room for doubt. And it's precisely that doubt that keeps the scientific community in a state of controlled tension, waiting, observing, preparing for what could be the most important event in the history of modern astronomy. Because November 4 is not just another date on the astronomical calendar. It's a test. It's the moment when predictions will meet reality. If 3I Atlas responds again to the solar eruption, if its behavior follows the anticipated pattern, if emissions increase during the impact of the coronal mass ejection, then Lyell's hypothesis will be exponentially strengthened. And if, in addition to responding, the object transmits a new sequence of signals, a new series of coded pulses, then we'll be facing what many scientists are already privately calling the November 4 message. A message that could contain real information, coordinates, instructions, a declaration of presence, or nothing might happen. The solar eruption could reach the estimated position of 3I Atlas. Energetic particles could traverse the space where the object should be, and our telescopes could register silence. Nothing but the background noise of the cosmos. And in that case, this entire story would become a fascinating but forgettable footnote in the annals of astronomy, a measurement anomaly, a set of coincidences that briefly made us dream of the impossible. But I don't believe it will be that way. And if you've made it this far in this video, you probably don't either. There's something else you need to know, something that hasn't been made public, but is being discussed at the highest levels of space agencies. After the pulse pattern of November 3 was detected, the Webb team performed an updated trajectory projection of 3I Atlas using the latest available astrometric measurements. And they discovered something disturbing. The object has reduced its speed, not drastically, but measurably, approximately 0.8% slower than when it was first detected. For a body in hyperbolic trajectory, traveling under the pure gravitational influence of the sun, this is impossible. The speed should be increasing as it approaches perihelion, not decreasing. It's as if 3I Atlas were intentionally braking, as if it were adjusting its speed to remain in a specific position in space for a specific period of time, as if it were waiting. This information has not been officially confirmed. The data is preliminary, the margins of error are wide, and NASA has been extremely careful not to make public statements that could generate panic or uncontrolled speculation. But the information is circulating, and those who have access to it are worried. Because if an interstellar object can modify its trajectory, then it's not a comet, it's a spacecraft. And if it's a spacecraft, then the questions we must ask ourselves change completely. It's not what is 3I Atlas, but who sent it. It's not where does it come from, but what does it want. It's not how does it work, but why is it here, now, at this moment in our history. Let me know in the comments if you think humanity is ready for a revelation of this magnitude. Are we prepared to know we're not alone? In approximately 18 hours from this moment, if the Solar Laboratory's calculations are correct, a wave of magnetized plasma, at temperatures of millions of degrees Celsius, will reach the spatial coordinates 2.3 astronomical units from the Sun, in the region delimited by the constellations of Taurus and Orion from our terrestrial perspective. At that point in space, slowly rotating on its axis, emitting regular pulses of electromagnetic radiation, waiting with patience that defies all human logic, is 3I, Atlas. And when the solar ejection reaches it, when billions of tons of charged particles envelop it in an embrace of invisible fire, we will know. We will know if this is truly a wandering chunk of ice and rock, or if it's something more, something that thinks, something that feels, something that communicates. The telescopes will be watching. Scientists will be analyzing every byte of information in real time. And somewhere on the planet, perhaps in a control room in Baltimore, or in an operations center in Pasadena, or in an observatory in the mountains of Chile, someone will see the first signal, the first change in the data, the first indication that 3I, Atlas, is responding. And in that moment, everything will change. Because we will no longer be alone in the universe. We will no longer be the only voice wondering if there's someone else out there listening. We will be the species that finally received an answer. Or maybe not. Maybe November 4 will pass without incident, and 3I, Atlas, will continue its journey toward the outer solar system, gradually moving away until it becomes another point of light lost among the stars. Another unsolved mystery in the infinite catalog of things we don't understand. Maybe this story will end with a sigh instead of a revelation. But even if that's the case, it will have been worth it. Because for a few brief days in November 2025, humanity looked toward the sky with renewed hope and curiosity, remembering that we are a species of explorers, of dreamers, of tireless seekers of answers to the biggest questions we can imagine. And those questions won't disappear. They will continue resonating in our minds, pushing us forward, toward the stars, toward the inevitable encounter with the unknown that awaits us somewhere in the future. Because if there's one lesson that 3I Atlas has taught us, it's this. The universe is stranger, more complex, more full of wonders than we ever imagined. And we're only beginning to scratch the surface of its secrets. So tomorrow, when the sun launches its flare toward the depths of space, when the electromagnetic storm travels through the vacuum seeking its distant target, think about this moment. Think about this solitary object floating in the darkness, patiently waiting its turn to speak. Think about all the unanswered questions, all the mysteries surrounding us, all the possibilities that open before us if only we have the courage to look. Because perhaps, just perhaps, 3I, Atlas didn't come to invade. It didn't come to destroy. It came to remind us of something we had forgotten, that we're not alone, that we never were, and that the cosmos is full of ancient voices calling to us from impossible distances, inviting us to join the greatest conversation of all. The conversation between the stars. The clock advances, the hours pass, and soon, very soon, we will know if this silent object traversing our solar system is the beginning of a new era for humanity, or simply another fascinating chapter in our long search for companionship in the infinite universe. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the real-time analysis of the November 4 event. I'll be covering every development, every new piece of information that comes to light. Comment below what you think will happen when that solar pulse reaches 3I, Atlas. Will we witness a simple physical reaction explainable by conventional science? Or will we be witnesses to the first intentional communication between humanity and something that came from the stars? Your opinion matters, because this is a story that belongs to all of us. And whatever the outcome, we'll discover it together, looking toward the same point in the sky, waiting for the answer that could change everything we think we know about our place in the cosmos. On the 2nd of November 2025, at 3:47 Universal Time, 3 different observatories simultaneously recorded the same phenomenon. An object that the scientific community had classified as wandering had just executed an orbital correction maneuver with 99.98% precision. It wasn't a minor adjustment. It wasn't a random event. It was the 8th movement in a sequence that has been repeating for 4 months. And each of these displacements follows the same mathematical proportion, 1.618. The golden ratio, the number that orders the structure of galaxies, the growth of sunflowers, the spiral of snails, and now, apparently, the trajectory of 3I, Atlas. During the last 72 hours, the data stopped being isolated anomalies to become evidence of something that physics cannot yet explain with current tools. Each displacement, each electromagnetic pulse, each angular velocity adjustment, Everything fits within a numerical sequence so exact that several astrophysicists compared the phenomenon to a self-correcting algorithm, as if the object were calculating its own path, as if it knew exactly where it's going. Before continuing, tell me in the comments what you think of this discovery. Do you believe we're facing a natural phenomenon or something more? Write the first thing that comes to mind when you hear 3I ATLS, because what I'm about to tell you in the next few minutes could completely change your way of understanding space. November 6 will be a key date. According to the most recent projections from the James Webb Telescope and the Very Large Telescope in Chile, on that day, at 18 UTC, 3I Atlas should execute its ninth course change. And if that movement confirms the pattern it's been following since July, we'll be facing the first observable demonstration of an interstellar body that doesn't obey chance, but rather a deliberate mathematical design. We're not talking about conspiracies. We're talking about verifiable data, equations replicated on 3 different continents, and scientists who are beginning to recognize, quietly and with extreme caution, that something about this object doesn't fit with anything known until now. 3I Atlas was first detected on the 14th of July, 2025, by the Atlas Automated System in Hawaii, the same one that identified the famous Oumuamua in 2017. At that moment, it seemed like just another interstellar comet. Hyperbolic trajectory, high velocity, confirmed extrasolar origin. NASA classified it as a low-interest object and included it in the list of interstellar minor bodies without major priority monitoring. But something changed in August. On August 19, the Canary Islands Observatory detected a brief luminous emission from the object. It wasn't the typical brightness of ice sublimation, nor standard solar reflection. It was an electromagnetic pulse lasting 0.3 seconds at a specific frequency, 1,420 megahertz. For those unfamiliar with radio astronomy, this is the frequency of neutral hydrogen, universally considered the contact frequency. It's the same one used in SETI projects to search for signals from extraterrestrial civilizations. Because hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, and any advanced technology would know that this frequency would be recognized. The pulse didn't repeat for 2 weeks. Then on September 3, it happened again. Exactly at the same moment when 3I Atlas executed a minimal change in its trajectory angle, 1.618 degrees. That number set off alarms in several orbital analysis teams. Because 1.618 isn't just any number, it's phi, the golden ratio, the mathematical constant that appears in the logarithmic spiral, in the arrangement of leaves on plants, in the architecture of seashells, in the structure of galaxy arms. It's the number that seems to be inscribed in the very fabric of nature. And now, that same number was appearing in the trajectory of an object coming from outside the solar system. The first analyses treated it as coincidence, an interesting statistical fluke, nothing more. But when the phenomenon repeated on September 17, and then October 1, and then October 15, always with the same angular proportion, always preceded by an electromagnetic pulse at 1,420 megahertz, the scientific community began to speak in different terms. It was no longer coincidence, it was a pattern. And patterns imply structure. Structure implies information, and information implies purpose. What if what we're seeing isn't a comet, but a machine created to observe us? Let that question float for a moment, because what comes next is even more unsettling. The James Webb Space Telescope was redirected toward 3I Atlas on October 22, in a decision that surprised several sectors of the astronomical community, because Webb's observation time is extremely limited and reserved for the highest priority objectives. That redirection was authorized directly by NASA's Scientific Coordination Team without public explanation. For 5 consecutive days, Webb recorded spectral data from the object, and what it found left several researchers speechless. The chemical composition of 3I Atlas doesn't match any known profile of comets, asteroids, or previously studied interstellar bodies. It doesn't present emissions of water, carbon monoxide, or carbon dioxide, which are the standard components of comets. Instead, the spectrum shows signatures of silicates organized in crystalline structures, traces of light metals in anomalous proportions, and strangest of all, a constant infrared emission that doesn't correspond with solar heating. It's as if the object were generating its own internal heat, as if it were active. This information hasn't been officially published. It's contained in a preliminary technical report that circulated in a restricted manner among researchers at the Max Planck Institute, the European Southern Observatory, and NASA's JPL. But several independent analysts have had access to fragments of the document, and the conclusions are unanimous. 3I, Atlas doesn't behave like an inert object. It behaves like a system with attitude control. That means it adjusts its orientation, angular velocity, and trajectory actively, not passively. And that, in simple terms, is what space probes do, not comets. Tell me in the comments which theory convinces you most so far. Do you believe we're facing a natural object with unknown properties? Or do you think there's something more behind all this? Write the word Atlas if you want me to continue investigating this case in depth. Now comes the most technical part, but also the most revealing. A group of mathematicians from the Canary Islands Institute of Astrophysics, led by Dr. Elena Marquez, decided to reconstruct the entire trajectory of 3I, Atlas, from its initial detection to the present date, using available public data and cross-referencing it with private observations from amateur telescopes distributed across more than 20 countries. What they discovered was so extraordinary that they presented the results in a preprint, not yet peer-reviewed, but already generating intense debates in specialized forums. According to their analysis, each inflection point in 3I, Atlas's trajectory, follows a mathematical progression based on the Fibonacci sequence 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, where each number is the sum of the two previous ones. This sequence, when applied to geometric relationships, converges toward the golden ratio, 1.618. And here's what's impressive. The turning angles executed by the object, measured in degrees relative to its previous trajectory, follow exactly that progression. The first change was 1 degree, the second, 1 degree, the third, 2 degrees, the fourth, 3 degrees, the fifth, 5 degrees, and so on. Each movement fits perfectly within the Fibonacci sequence. This isn't something that can occur by chance. The probability that an interstellar body, subjected only to gravitational forces and solar wind, would execute 8 consecutive course changes that follow a specific mathematical progression is astronomically low. Some preliminary calculations place it at less than 1 in 10 billion. That means, statistically, it's more likely that we're facing a designed phenomenon than a cosmic coincidence. And this is where the tension begins to escalate. Because if 3I, Atlas, is following a deliberate mathematical pattern, then someone or something programmed it. And if it was programmed, then it has a purpose. The question is, what? There are several hypotheses in circulation, and none are comforting. The first, the most conservative, suggests that 3I, Atlas, could be a fragment of a larger object that disintegrated under specific conditions, generating an asymmetric mass distribution that, through pure orbital mechanics, produces apparently regular trajectory adjustments. This explanation, however, doesn't resolve the problem of electromagnetic pulses or the anomalous infrared emission. The second hypothesis is bolder. We're facing an interstellar artifact, a probe sent by a technologically advanced civilization, designed to travel between stellar systems, following predictable and efficient trajectories. This theory is supported by the fact that the golden ratio is considered universal, precisely because it appears in multiple natural contexts and because any civilization with advanced mathematical knowledge would recognize it immediately. Using that proportion as the basis for a trajectory would be a way to communicate intelligence without needing language. It would be like saying, "This isn't random. This was created, and we want you to know it." The third hypothesis, less popular but not completely ruled out, suggests that 3I, Atlas, could be a human experiment. A classified mission launched decades ago, perhaps in the 80s or 90s, using advanced propulsion technology that was never revealed to the public. This theory would explain the attitude control, the program trajectory, and the official silence from space agencies. But it doesn't explain the absence of launch records, nor the object's initial velocity upon entering the solar system, which is consistent with an extrasolar origin. Moreover, if it were a human mission, why would NASA and other agencies seem so surprised by the object's behavior? Why redirect the James Webb if they already knew what to expect? And if what we're seeing is neither natural nor human, then we're facing the most unsettling possibility of all. That 3I, Atlas, is exactly what it appears to be. A test, a demonstration, a message sent through the only language that transcends cultures, planets, and galaxies. Mathematics. Each time the object emits a pulse, it corrects its own position. Who or what guides it? That question has begun to resonate in the corridors of institutions that normally avoid this type of speculation. Because the data no longer allow comfortable skepticism. The numbers are there, the observations are there, and the pattern is undeniable. On October 28, a researcher from the SETI Institute, whose name hasn't been publicly revealed, sent an internal memorandum to several colleagues suggesting that an intensive monitoring protocol be activated for 3I Atlas over the next 2 weeks. The memorandum, partially leaked through specialized social networks, mentions that if the object executes the 9th trajectory adjustment according to the Fibonacci progression, will be obligated to consider the intelligent design hypothesis as the most parsimonious explanation. That phrase, coming from an institute dedicated to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, carries enormous weight because it means that even the most cautious scientists are beginning to recognize that perhaps, just perhaps, we're seeing something we've never seen before. But there's something more, something almost no one is mentioning publicly, but that's circulating in private conversations among astronomers: the direction. Because 3I Atlas isn't just following a mathematical pattern. It's also adjusting its trajectory in such a way that, if it continues with the current progression, its 9th course change will place it at an optimal approach angle toward Earth's orbital plane. It's not that it's going to impact, it's not that it represents a danger, but it's as if it were approaching, observing, positioning itself to have a clearer view of our planet. And that, combined with everything else, generates a sensation that goes beyond scientific curiosity. It generates unease. On November 6th, at 18 Universal Time, all eyes of the scientific world will be on 3I Atlas. That day, according to projections based on the Fibonacci sequence, the object should execute a 13-degree course change. If that movement occurs with the expected precision, it will be the definitive confirmation that we're not facing a random phenomenon. It will be proof that something, somewhere in deep space, decided to send us an object that speaks our language, the language of mathematics, the language of logic, the language of intelligence. And if that happens, then we'll have to answer a much bigger question: why? Why send an object that moves according to the golden ratio? Why use the Fibonacci sequence? Why emit pulses at the neutral hydrogen frequency? Is it a way of saying we're here? Is it an invitation to respond? Or is it simply a demonstration that we're not alone, and that someone else in the universe also knows the laws that govern reality? Some scientists believe that 3I Atlas could be part of a network of interstellar probes sent by an advanced civilization, designed to map stellar systems, gather information, and perhaps establish contact with other forms of intelligent life. This hypothesis isn't new. The concept of von Neumann probes, self-replicating machines that travel between stars exploring and transmitting information, has been discussed in scientific literature for decades. And if 3I Atlas were one of those probes, its behavior would make sense. Follow an efficient trajectory, use recognizable mathematical patterns as a signature of intelligence, and position itself strategically to observe targets of interest. Like Earth, other researchers are more cautious. They argue that we're projecting our own expectations onto a phenomenon we still don't fully understand. That the golden ratio appears in so many natural contexts that its presence in the trajectory of an interstellar object could simply be another manifestation of the physical laws that govern the cosmos. That electromagnetic pulses could have a geophysical or astrophysical explanation we haven't yet discovered. That we are, in short, seeing patterns where there's only noise. But that explanation becomes harder to sustain with each new observation, because the pattern isn't just consistent, it's precise, it's predictable. And that, in science, is what separates chance from design. Write in the comments what you think will happen on November 6. Do you believe 3I Atlas will confirm the pattern? Or do you think all this is an exaggerated interpretation of natural data? Leave me your theory, because in a few days we'll know the answer. Meanwhile, there's another layer of mystery we can't ignore: the official silence. Since the more detailed observations of 3I Atlas began, neither NASA, nor ESA, nor any other major space agency has issued a public statement explaining the phenomenon. The only statements have been extremely brief, classifying the object as low risk and under routine investigation. But that contradicts the fact that the most advanced space telescope ever built was specifically redirected to study it. It contradicts the fact that observatories on 3 continents are continuously monitoring the object. And it contradicts the internal reports that have begun to leak, suggesting there's a much greater level of concern than is publicly acknowledged. This type of silence isn't unusual when space agencies face phenomena they can't easily explain. It happened with Oumuamua in 2017, when NASA took weeks to acknowledge that the object's anomalous acceleration couldn't be explained solely by outgassing. It happened with fast radio bursts detected in 2020, whose origin remains debated. And it's happening now with 3I, Atlas, because admitting you don't have an explanation generates uncertainty. And uncertainty, in matters related to space and possible signals of extraterrestrial intelligence, generates unpredictable reactions in the public. But silence also generates speculation. And speculation, fueled by real data and verifiable patterns, can become more powerful than any official statement, because people no longer blindly trust institutional narratives. People search for answers on their own. And when the data is available, when the numbers speak for themselves, when the pattern is so clear that anyone with basic mathematical knowledge can verify it, then official silence stops being protection and becomes confirmation. Perhaps NASA's waiting to have more data before making a statement. Perhaps they're evaluating the implications of each possible explanation before communicating something that could fundamentally change our understanding of the universe. Or perhaps simply they don't know what to say. Because recognizing that an interstellar object is following a deliberate mathematical pattern opens a door that humanity has never officially crossed. The door that leads to admitting we're not alone, that we never were, and that someone else, somewhere in the cosmos, also looks at the stars and wonders who else is out there. 3I, Atlas, might not be a simple rock from deep space. It could be the first tangible, verifiable, and observable proof that intelligence isn't an accident exclusive to Earth. It could be a system designed to move according to the same mathematical laws that shape the universe, sent by a civilization that understood long ago that mathematics is the only truly universal language. A language that needs no translation, that doesn't depend on culture, biology, or history. A language that says, we understand the same truths as you, and we're here. November 6 won't just test scientific projections about an object's trajectory. It will test our willingness to accept that perhaps the universe isn't the empty and silent place we believed. That perhaps the cosmos is full of messages waiting to be deciphered. And that perhaps, finally, one of those messages has just arrived. But there's something we can't forget. Even if the pattern is confirmed, even if 3I Atlas proves to be something more than a natural object, the questions won't end. They'll only begin. Because confirming that something was designed doesn't tell us who designed it. It doesn't tell us where it comes from. It doesn't tell us how long it's been traveling through space. It doesn't tell us if it's a probe sent hundreds, thousands, or millions of years ago. It doesn't tell us if those who sent it still exist. It doesn't tell us if they'll ever know we found it. And it doesn't tell us if this is the only message, or if there are thousands of objects like 3I, Atlas, traveling between the stars, waiting to be discovered by civilizations that are just beginning to look beyond their own solar system. What it does tell us, if all this turns out to be true, is that the universe is more complex, more interesting, and more mysterious than we ever imagined. That mathematics isn't just a human tool for understanding reality, but a language inscribed in the very structure of the cosmos. And that perhaps, just perhaps, we're about to understand that we were never alone. We were just waiting for the right moment to listen. Perhaps in the coming days we'll have answers. Or perhaps 3I, Atlas, only came to remind us that there are still mysteries in the universe that surpass us. That there are still questions we don't know how to formulate. And that sometimes the most important answers don't come in words, but in numbers, in patterns, in signals that cross the void of space to reach us and tell us, in the oldest and most universal language of all, that we're not alone. If you want to stay up to date with every new piece of data about this object, subscribe to the channel and leave me a comment telling me which theory you find most credible. Is 3I, Atlas, a natural phenomenon we still don't understand? Is it an interstellar probe sent by an advanced civilization? Or is it something completely different that we're not yet capable of imagining? On November 6, we'll have more clues, and I'll be here, analyzing every piece of data, every movement, every possibility. Because if this object has taught us anything, it's that the universe still has secrets, and some of those secrets are written in the language of mathematics, waiting to be read.